Well, one thing popped. I don't know. Yeah, everything was quite loud. This is what we're left with. These pieces here, it actually blew the little top off. And everything's intact, it's just in pieces. So. Alright, well, there was good news and bad news with that one. The good news is it worked, as you can see. The bad news is it started working before I even put it down, so there may be a functional issue there. Here's the grenade up close. Let's see what's left of the shell. And it's still screwed into the top portion. We've done this stuff several times, and the pieces are resilient enough. The trick really is just to kind of get the right mix of baking soda, water, and citric acid. You should be able to, you can see this stuff is very, when it pops, it's almost like, I don't want to say paper, but it is sharp on its edges. You know, if you were to try to give yourself a paper cut, you certainly would be successful. But as far as it flying out, I wouldn't be too concerned. What you see here too is the spread. And I'm going to zoom in here and give you guys a better view. You can see the actual grenade right there. You can see two previous splatter marks, and they kind of just go off, and undoubtedly what you're seeing is little chunks of baking soda. If I had to guess, I mean, based on what I'm seeing here, the blast radius, you know, in terms of being struck with material or matter, you can even see some of it got on the lens there actually. But it appears to be right around 5 feet, 6 tops. You might get sprayed with water, of course, past that, but anyway, that's the Cida Airsoft grenade. Okay, so here we have one of the Cida Airsoft grenades. It is assembled, but it's not loaded per se. When you pull the pin, as you can see right here, it's really nothing fancy. It's just a straight piece of metal. You do have to sort of manipulate the spoon a little bit to allow the pin to go all the way through. And then once, of course, it's through, friction does do a pretty good job of keeping it in place. Simple pull ring, of course, allows you to arm it, and then watch towards the bottom of the orange cylinder, so right in this area here you'll see a little plunger that comes down when the spoon pops up. So obviously, as you've seen already, or depending on where I decide to put this clip, what happens is you have the cylinder, which would basically contain the plunger, and I'm going to show you that in just a sec. But the cylinder contains the plunger, and when you release the spoon, the spring-loaded plunger forces its way downwards, pushing the little end cap off and releasing the citric acid, hopefully into the mix of water and baking soda. That causes a gaseous expansion, and I know I'm going to get a ton of comments about that, but that's what it is. And the air, of course, or whatever type of gas builds up in here, forces its way through the plastic, and you'll actually see it if you watch the videos closely, or if you decide to purchase this yourself. You'll see that a portion of the bottle will actually balloon outwards. It's actually kind of interesting, and the explosion, or the expulsion anyway, of the air mix in here is quite loud. The manufacturer says that you can insert BBs in here and sort of create a fragmentation airsoft grenade effect, or leave the BBs out for a flashbang effect. I've not yet tested it with the BBs, to be honest with you. It's so loud that I'm a little bit leery about testing too many of these in my neighborhood, because it really sounds, it's almost as loud as a gunshot, almost. And for those of you who've never heard a gunshot, it's loud enough to where you almost need earplugs. So this is the insides with the little shell off. I realize that with the white background it might be sort of difficult to see, but considering how messy this is, I have to do this in the laundry room area. Now, like I said, this is the plunger that you saw pop down. What you want to do, and I've done a lot of this in terms of trial and error, is you actually want to push the plunger in when you're reloading it or loading it for the first time. What you want to do is you want to push the plunger down with your finger, and then set the spoon. And I'll show you in a sec why that is. If you try to force the spoon down to try to get the plunger up, you'll actually end up eventually breaking the unit, so just be aware of that. Once you've got the spoon loaded, you're going to want to insert the pin, doesn't matter which side, and then you've got the spoon set in place. The plunger is, as you can see here, it goes down basically to this small line right here, and then you would dump your citric acid in there. I find that you're going to want to bring the citric acid almost to the top, leaving almost, I'd say, an eighth of an inch or so, because you're going to need to be able to force the little cap on securely. Now, one of my biggest problems with the grenade, even though I like most of it, and the design I think is actually a pretty decent one, is the fact that I've had at least 2 grenades go off unintentionally, and that is because this little end cap is only held on by friction. So I suppose that if you were carrying this in the field, you could carry it upside down to sort of help keep this little cap on, but my concern would really just be that this thing would come off too easily and it would inadvertently pop, which is obviously something you don't want to have happen, especially if you've got any kind of expensive electronics in your, your chest harness or something. So that's the biggest weakness. There would theoretically be ways around it, carrying this thing perhaps in a very well-contained bag or satchel or something like that. Cida Airsoft actually sent along one of these little grenade pouches, and to a certain extent I think it addresses the concerns I have. It has the MOLLE attachments for your chest rig, and it actually has a plastic liner which would contain, I suppose, most of the explosive blast. Probably scare the crap out of you, but if you had this thing securely fastened, you'd probably be alright. Maybe you'd get a little moist up the sides here, but perhaps nothing too bad. So in a way, I think that Cida has you covered here. It is sort of a risk you want to take, but on the other side of it, these things are probably not going to be as expensive as the competitors. Is it going to be as effective as, say, the tornado grenade? I don't know. I've not tested it side by side, but what I do know is that the tornado grenades are expensive. Awesome pieces of hardware, but they're expensive. And you do throw a grenade, so if you throw it, and I've seen them thrown, you might not find it again, and that of course would be kind of stinky. So here is an economical option, as I see it. This is something that you could afford to lose and probably not come away with too much expense lost. Now, I've shown you how it looks assembled. This, of course, is what this is the result of an explosion. You can see part of the shell still attached, and I'm actually going to show you how to remove that. Cida Airsoft has a very handy little tool that they sent. It's basically just a piece of metal tubing, and it has basically these teeth on the end here. And the idea is to get this shell off, you basically just insert it and you use the teeth to grab the shell, and then you can kind of just pull it off. It's an ingenious little tool, and as I said, it goes to the reusability, even though technically you could, stand to lose it. But what you have here is the inside. This is the actual spring-loaded plunger. You can see this, would go up all the way, and well, not all the way. It would end up here about. Of course, this is the cylinder that guides it up. But one thing you want to know is that this whole design uses pressure. So you're going to need to make sure that this is a seal, basically. You want to make sure that you sort of fan this rubber seal out, mushroom it out, because when you insert it in this, what will happen is, as I pointed out in the demo of the grenade itself, what will happen is the pressure actually forces this thing up, and the spoon comes down. That's an indicator that there's an extreme amount of pressure. And you're going to need to make sure that there is no air or water or whatever getting past the seal. If there is, you're going to see the grenade kind of just sputter out, and the pressure will just vent through the top, and that of course is not going to result in an explosion. So be aware of that. The other thing is the actual disassembly. Sometimes I found it necessary to pop this top off, and I'm going to show you. It's not very difficult, but you need something to pry it up and off. So I'm going to use a screwdriver to show you. Okay, I've already done it a little bit off camera for the sake of time. You start by just kind of jamming the screwdriver under there. There are just two plastic tabs, one on either side, that keep the cap in place. There's two little spots you can see, and the spoon itself is actually detachable. One good thing to notice too is kind of my trial and error efforts here. You see this thing, it shouldn't look like that. It should be a very clean little tab, and the reason that it's so torn up looking is because at first I thought that I could simply use the spoon to pull the entire assembly upwards, the plunger upwards. Now here's what I'm talking about. Okay, you see this part, it's pretty self-explanatory, but where the spoon locks in is this little, you see that slot there right in the middle of the stock? That is where the spoon would lever in. So I'm going to try to do this on camera for you. What you want to do is you want to make sure that it's lined up, because if it's not, the plunger will not stay up. Okay, so right here you can maybe just barely see the little tab in between the stock right there in the slot, and in this form it's keeping the plunger up. But as just happened, because this little tab is kind of worn away, it can easily pop down. Of course, there's more to hold it in place when you have the actual cap on as well. So you get that little tab, that little foot, whatever you want to call it, to kind of seat. And then once you've done that, I find that you just want to try to get that little end cap on. At this point, if you've done a good job, you can just kind of hold the spoon there. You're going to put the cap on, and then you just want to try to close it down, get those tabs in place. And then you can of course insert the pin if you want to lock the spoon down in place. Of course it's not cooperating for me naturally because it's on camera. Usually you can see light through the little pinhole there, and once you've got that in place, it'll kind of stay put. There's another piece in here. It's a seal. It's a rubber seal that you'll need to install, and you do need to install that because if you don't, air, water, and so forth will escape up and out. So make sure you do that. It's a little rubber seal. It's pretty self-explanatory. Just pop it in there and kind of forget about it. You really don't ever have to mess with the seal. I haven't had to anyway, at least the one up here. Down here you want to make sure that this little rubber flange is all mushroomed out, and then you would add your citric acid. The little end cap is attached via this tiny chain, which I have accidentally detached many times, so be aware of that. In this case, probably going to have to go through this procedure again because it's not fully seating because the little end cap wants to pop off. But the assembly process that I showed you is exactly what you would follow. I have found that when I can't get the spoon to properly seat, it usually means that the little slot and foot aren't or tab aren't lined up. So that should at least give you an idea of how to operate this thing. With any luck, you can avoid the mistakes that I did. Believe me, I have tried both lemon juice, sort of like a lemon flu mix, lemon flavored flu tea mix. I've tried vinegar, which is the first thing I thought would work, and the only thing that provides the amount of gas buildup for this, to pop this, is citric acid. This is an example of what I found. It's pretty generic as far as I know. I went to a health food store and just asked for it. So there you go. That's the Cida Airsoft grenade.